Welcome everyone to this episode of Small Business Small Talk. It's a show to educate on business tactics, inspire you with new ideas, to engage you at a new level in your business and community, and entertain you a little bit along the way. I am your host, Christy Smallwood, Chief Strategic Guide and owner of Eagle Eye Strategies, a strategy-first business based in Louisville, Kentucky that helps you break status quo of business as usual, help you bring order to chaos, spark inspiration, and light fires of action under your ass to educate, engage, and empower business leaders all over the world to get things done. I want to start by giving a shout out to our sponsor partner, the Chamber of St. Matthews. They have been excellent partners in this podcast this year to just give me basically an open way to bring in as many guests as I wanted. So with that, we've had a lot of fabulous interviews this 2020 season. It's been a great year for this podcast. I appreciate all of you listening, all of you watching the video episodes, and I have a very special episode for you. So the backstory with this one is I am a part of podcast groups on Facebook and different conversations to learn how to do things better, bigger, whatever. And I randomly ran into this wonderful, wonderful lady. Her name is Serena Gay, and she is based in Cheltenham, Gloucestershire in England. Okay, so in Great Britain. And she has a podcast that it focuses on the conversation wrapped around the revival of small business in Cheltenham, Gloucestershire. I was so excited to run across her. I reached out and I said, hey, guess what kind of podcast I have? And she and I decided it would be a great conversation to have together of what the state of small business is like through 2020 on both sides of the quote unquote proverbial big pond. So with that, I want to start our episode of Small Business Small Talk with Serena Gay, guest speaker today. Now, here we are.
Well, after what can only be said, be called a technical journey, we have finally arrived.
Yes.
At a combination of iPhones and Zoom links and so forth that actually works. I really feel it's been a bit of a slog to get here, but here we are.
Here we are. But the nice thing, I will say, Serena, the nice thing is that I have gotten to know you more because we kept trying and trying and trying. So I appreciate the moments that we've had so far in what I call our proverbial green room moments. So like all of those are just between you and I, and now we're going to do something for the public consumption.
That's right. I mean, this is quite apart from the fact that we've already done the interview, right?
Yes.
I mean, we had this hilarious discussion where we covered just about every subject under the sun, except the ones we wanted to cover. And, no, including those two. And yet, of course, when we actually listened to the playback, it was full of, there was some horrible problem in the line. And so we just really seem to have had a difficult time of it, but now we're here. And I think we really should start off, don't you, with drawing that amazing parallel between our two towns.
Yes.
So I'm from Cheltenham in the UK. Yeah, right. So I'm from Cheltenham, which is in Gloucestershire in the west of the UK. And what we are particularly famous for, among other things, is our horse racing. And what is it that
what
your
do you
hometown
know?
is?
So are we. Here based in Louisville, Kentucky, we have the Kentucky Derby, which I was thinking about this morning before our interview. And I was like, we have the holidays coming up. Christmas is right next week, then New Year's. And for us in our town, it goes New Year's Derby. Like there's no other conversation that then happens because from the beginning of the new year, we're in the middle of winter. It's cold, it's dreary. So the only thing we have to look forward to, it seems like, is the Derby time around here. 2 weeks of festivals leading up to that 2-minute race. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, that's what it's like around here.
Well, that's amazing because here in Cheltenham, New Year's Day is really important for the horse racing. And anybody who's anybody, my dear, goes to the horse races, and everybody goes and they wear their funny country hats and their country gear, their tweed suits and so forth. And there's this famous moment in the horse races, which is, I think it's called the Cheltenham Cheer, when the first race starts off and the horses come go round and round, and they come cantering back down towards the finish line, and this roar erupts from the stadium, and it's quite a well-known moment in the Cheltenham year. So I'm sure you have a similar kind of horse racing.
We have that same experience. Derby Day is pretty big. Now, honestly, for the locals, because we know Derby brings in everyone from everywhere. It is the who's who tends to show up. But there's 2 days prior to that. There's a Wednesday before where all of the business people get together. Like, that's their day. And then we have what's called Thurby. So that's the Thursday before. And that's when everybody starts to like shut down offices. We're not going to work anymore the rest of the week. And then Friday is Oaks. So that's the Run for the Lilies, and that's a lot of charity days. So a lot of breast cancer awareness days, because they do the pink lilies. So, and then Saturday is the actual Kentucky Derby. So we celebrate. There's a Derby for locals every single day of that week. It seems like
fantastic. But you do have to ask yourselves what's going to happen this year, because I mean, New Year's Day this year is just not going to be the same. It's not going to happen. In fact, Cheltenham came in for a lot of stick, or at least that's a term we use here. A lot of stick means as in a lot of criticism, because just as the epidemic was taking off in March, the big race week that we have in March nevertheless took place. And there was a huge amount of controversy as to why this was allowed to happen, because, there was a spike certainly in Cheltenham of virus cases, coronavirus cases. So, when our horse racing tradition is going to be allowed free rein again, who knows? But was there any such problems?
Yeah, because our race is the first Saturday of May. And so epidemic starts hitting in March, restrictions start to hit. There was immediate conversation of what do we do? And for honestly, the first 6 to 8 weeks, when the restrictions even happened, they're like, we're still going to have the Derby. It'll all be okay by Derby. And it wasn't. And so then additional things in our town started happening, such as you might have heard about the Breonna Taylor situation with social injustice with the police department and different things that caused a lot of not just controversy, but protests and then riots. And so there was a lot of threats. And I'm just going to put it out there. There were a lot of threats about having the Derby from groups that were having an issue over here with that subject, were threatening the Derby event. And so what they did is they still had the races, but they restricted the audience. And so it wasn't the same experience, but they still had the race. And so that way they could have the next race and the next race, which is the Belmont and the Preakness, so that they could have this whole Triple Crown experience for the horse itself and the owners and things. And so it was definitely not a normal Derby at all. Festivities were canceled all over the place. You couldn't really have parties. We did some virtual parties. We did the virtual dress up of our hats and, frills and things and bow ties. And it just was not the same. And that's when it definitely emotionally hit our area that, this really is a horrible experience for everybody on everything. And so that's when we started looking at, well, what's going to get canceled next? Are we going to have a state fair? Are we going to be doing different things throughout the rest of the year? If Derby got canceled, what about this? What about that? So it just became more escalated with that experience. It was awful, but yeah,
it sounded as if you found ways to address the problem and work around it.
Yes.
And I guess that is the experience of this year, isn't it? Especially for small businesses, is facing the problems head on and finding a way around it. And that's what you have been talking to people, am I right, about on your podcast?
Yes.
Is how they're coping.
Yes, we've addressed a lot of that. With my podcast, I love to spotlight those small businesses to give other listeners an idea of what that business looks like, who that business owner is, as well as how they've been managing and what they have found works, and then where they find motivation and inspiration. Like, how are you learning new things to be able to make changes that are going to set yourself up for success the next day, not 5 years from now, but like tomorrow you're going to wake up and do this thing. How is that going to help you? And so we started pulling those conversations in, and that spotlighting those small business, because we, as a small business community, we can, our favorite word, pivot a lot faster than larger corporations. And so we can get very creative very quickly. We don't have all of the proverbial red tape. We don't have as many restrictions to make change as fast as we possibly can. Our restaurant industry has been hardest hit, and hospitality events, that pretty much stopped overnight. And so how has that been there with you in Gloucestershire? Am I saying that correctly?
It's Gloucestershire. It's a word that has been invented to trip people up, I tell you.
Well, so has Louisville. So
yeah, it tripped me up the first time. I'm not sure I've got my tongue around it yet, but anyway. But to go back to your question, well, interestingly, Cheltenham is very dependent on its restaurant business. I mean, it's very strong here. Of course, we have other areas of industry which are important, but in Cheltenham, there are far more restaurants per head probably than in many other similar sized towns throughout the United Kingdom. And that has been hit terribly hard. Funnily enough, one of the people that I interviewed on my podcast the other day, which is really about business revival in Gloucestershire. So it's talking to businesses about how they're managing to emerge unscathed, or as unscathed as possible. Right. And so I was talking to one of the premier Chinese restaurant owners in Cheltenham, and Chun Kong, as he's called, he has been running this restaurant since 1982, and it's really like sort of a landmark in the town. Everybody knows it, everybody's been there, and he has steered his restaurant through highs and lows. And I mean, as he was telling me, every decade there's some sort of an economic recession, and he's managed to keep going. So, and he was telling me that he thought that the independent restaurants were coming out of it better than the chain restaurants. So we've got loads of chain restaurants in Cheltenham, but we also have our fair share of independent ones too. And he was saying that he thought that they were coming through it better, the independent ones, because they have more freedom, I suppose, to pivot or even pirouette, to cope, to adjust. They unlike the chain restaurants, which are sort of shackled by all that, all the things that a big company is shackled by. The independent small restaurants can move more quickly to adapt. So, but the restaurant and event trade in Cheltenham, which is so strong normally, has definitely been really hit for six, as we would say. I think it's a cricket term in the United Kingdom. And so we are definitely suffering from that point of view. But other than the horses, what other sort of what typifies Kentucky businesses? What would you say are the strongest sort of threads?
Well, we're definitely not, as a comedian put it. So a comedian friend of mine would always introduce Kentucky to somebody as the state that might kill you. Our biggest exports are horse racing, bourbon, and tobacco. So we have our own trifecta here. But we're a strong agriculture. Our tech is starting to finally emerge. In Louisville, we have a very strong healthcare environment. So a lot of innovation around medical things are happening right in Louisville. So you kind of have Louisville proper, which is our biggest city. And then you have Kentucky, because the two are a little bit of a different personality overall, if you would. Okay. Yeah. Louisville is a very liberal leaning town, I would say, versus Kentucky as a whole is a lot more conservative. So it's kind of a weird dynamic that we all play well together in the state. So yeah, the things that will kill you is what we do the most. It's just always been a fun thing. The bourbon is, I mean, Kentucky is the home of bourbon. And we have, part of that is the limestone water that we have here, and the equivalent of corn mash to all of that. So there's the science behind it. We have a lot of distilleries, a lot of artisan distilleries, a lot of big names you might know. And so one of the things that they even did very creatively, almost immediately, is when this hit, the first thing the government says, the CDC said, is wear masks, sanitize your hands, wash your hands, wear a mask, wash your hands, wear a mask, over and over. Well, the supply of those things were where? Like, nobody had, right? So we had to learn how to come up with this stuff. Distilleries have the equipment to make hand sanitizer, right? So they just were able to halt certain things and make plenty of hand sanitizer to get it out into the marketplace to at least even that out. And so, now that's been going well. But yeah, those are some of the bigger things that we have here locally.
You'd have thought that the alcohol industry would have done quite well in the previous few months, because what could people do to entertain themselves if they couldn't have a drink, and in fact, they've been saying in this country that meat has had a tremendous boost this year, having in fact quite the opposite, experienced reducing sales in previous years, because people have been, what could they do? They've been having barbecues in the garden. I mean, so they've been consuming more meat, which is really fascinating. Good thing or bad thing, I don't really know. I don't have an opinion on the fact, but it's just fascinating to see how things are changing. So I'm assuming that the Kentucky bourbon industry didn't suffer during the pandemic. No,
alcohol. You're right. Alcohol never really suffers. It's recession proof. It's an industry that will survive pretty much an apocalypse. It's the thing that will keep on going.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we don't have to repeat that part. Yeah. But the events, the industry has been. So what are some things in Cheltenham that has what are some of your bigger industries there that have been affected, or what do you shine in?
Well, actually, we shine in intelligence. Now, I don't mean that we're all brilliantly clever, but the intelligence industry, the government's own sort of intelligence HQ headquarters, which is known as GCHQ, is based in Cheltenham in this extraordinary building. It's called, popularly referred to as the donut. It's this great, huge, round shape with a kind of hole in the middle, and which is protected from the outside, this hole, and it's a park, really. And so people who are working inside can go, I'm assuming, and have their lunch times in the
courtyard. Yeah,
exactly, without fear of being targeted, but from the outside. Anyway, but cyber security, intelligence, all this is a really important part of our world here, and of course it's true to say, I think, and I'm not saying this tongue in cheek, but that quite a lot of clever people live and work in Cheltenham because of this whole intelligence,
yes,
cybersecurity, etc. factor. And so we have a really amazing selection of schools in Cheltenham. Really outstanding private and public schools. Of course, that creates confusion, because in this country, if you call a school a public school, you're actually referring to a school where you have to pay fees. It's weird, it's outdated, but if you talk about a public school in this country, you're talking about a very expensive school, whereas a state school is you don't have to pay fees to go there. Yes, I know. Isn't that confusing? Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, but we have really top of the range state schools and top of the range private schools. We're very lucky to have that selection. And we also have, sorry, just to go back to the sort of cyber thing, we have this burgeoning cyber security industry. We're in the midst of establishing a cyber park, and all sorts of incredible infrastructure works are going on to improve our connectivity, because we're not that far from London, but we are about 2.5 hours away from London. So we're improving our, all our transport links, and all that is happening to kind of upgrade access to Cheltenham. And so I mean, I've just been talking, I just interviewed a few days ago our local MP, that is to say our member of parliament. So the equivalent of your congressional member, I guess.
Right.
And yeah. And so he was telling me, well, we were just discussing, how things look for Cheltenham, and it is relatively positive despite what's been going on. But of course, Cheltenham has suffered in other ways. But yeah, no, so there's a lot going on here, and it's all very exciting. But that's not to say that it's going to take us a long while to recover from this huge blow and it must be the same with you. What are you looking at? Yeah,
we've been hearing on an average about 3 years for recovery. And as we well know, our presidential elections are every 4 years. So if you take into account a 3-year turnaround, by that time we're ready to vote again for another president. So I don't know that it's even going to be only 3 years because of the way our structure is over here. It might take a little longer, but some things are going to come back a lot faster based on just restrictions lifting. So once we get, to pass that point of you have to stay home and don't touch people, then I think everything will start to open back up. The past couple of days, I saw a notice that the restaurants were back to 50% capacity. So that was amazing, considering they had just previously, for the previous 6 weeks, I think already have been at 25% capacity. So most of our restaurants have put up outside seating, tents, different things like that to be able to accommodate additional capacity. But along with that comes additional cost, but additional capacity. But now it's winter. So what do? You have to, people, I mean, I know heaters are great, but still, what do you do?
Yeah, I know. And you don't naturally think, do you? Oh, let's go and sit outside in January for a meal. No. I mean, I have to admit, I'm not that familiar with Kentucky's weather, but it's really winter here. I mean, we may not be getting snow. I mean, we may have slightly milder winters than elsewhere in Europe, but you wouldn't immediately think of going outside.
No, I don't. That's not my thing.
No. But you talk as if, the end is in sight, and for all the lockdown measures or the restriction measures, as you refer to them. But here we're beginning to think about another lockdown after Christmas, because we're going to get this spike over Christmas. And I think our authorities are beginning to prepare us, actually, in a kind of quiet way, for another lockdown.
Really?
So will that not happen with you? Will you not have reinforced restrictions?
I think the way, just based on that conversation, this is purely speculation and opinion. Yeah. But I would think that our country right now is concentrating on the next president and the vaccines. So that's the two conversations right now that are happening. And people tend to just obsessively focus on that which the media tells them to focus on. And so we haven't heard a whole lot about having another restriction. I think they will probably wait to drop that bomb until after our holidays. Nobody really wants to ruin the holidays for people. So let's just wait till the day after Christmas, and then we'll probably, and that might, because some of us who've been on the periphery of a government kind of experience, we're we feel that's coming, but they're going to wait till after Halloween to close us down. And they did. We feel this is coming, but they'll probably wait till after this big thing is over. And they did. And so we can kind of see behavior patterns within our own government officials of when they want to make us unhappy and when they don't. Yeah. So I think they will probably not really prepare us for another lockdown. They will probably just drop it. But I think with the vaccine conversation, everybody has super high hopes that the vaccine magically fixes it. And that's never what a vaccine has been for. It's not going to cure people, and it gives a higher rate of like you may not get it, but we still don't know. Like there's still a lot of unknowns, but a lot of people are definitely placing a lot of hope that restrictions will be lifted once the vaccine has been dispersed. And I don't share that same opinion with others. I'm just like waiting to see what happens.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, thank goodness that a vaccine has been, or several different vaccines, they've produced them and they brought them out. Thank goodness it's going to make all the difference. But I mean, it's going to take a long time to roll it out, to get it to
Yes.
all of us. Well,
Yes.
what kind of expectation do you have as to when you personally will receive it?
I will be one of the last on the list. If we're looking at me personally, I'll be, because I don't fit the normal demographics of people. So I won't get that first one. So I'm not elderly. I'm not in a healthcare environment. I'm not, I'm not hitting those first line criteria of needing to get the vaccine. So I'll be kind of lower on the list, which means I just stay in my home office and wear a mask when I go out and hand sanitizer, all the basics.
So now tell me more though about the kinds of businesses that you've been talking to recently and what they've been saying to you.
Sure. I've run the gamut of the scope of a variety of businesses, everything from senior living centers to HR recruiters, so employment recruiters, and not payroll. She was credit card processing business. I've talked with those who do nonprofits, those who have a university. So we have a small university here that works like a small business. Some creative companies, the chamber. Actually, I interviewed our local chamber as well. So the Chamber of Commerce. And that was a beautiful interview of, how they as a team were experiencing these new things, and how that was early on in 2020 when I interviewed them, and all of these ideas that bubbled up, even just from that they've implemented and has really, yes, our chamber, our local chamber is called the Chamber of St. Matthews. And we have done an amazing job. I used to be on the board. I'm still a very active member, and an amazing job of creating connections, even in the midst of this, when you can't go eat lunch together, have the speaker, make the connections there. There's no more handshaking. And yet they've still done this fantastic job of helping us as a small business community still create connections and leads and referral bases and all of this kind of stuff. So they've done a really great job there. And so, yeah, I've kind of run the gamut of I've talked to so many, I keep forgetting, photographers. I've had a couple of photographers, project management, event spaces. I went and did an on-site interview with an event space. So we talked about how they were adjusting through COVID, because an event producer is different than an event venue in what you can do and function within all of this. So yeah, it's talked to a lot of people on a lot of things. It's been a great conversation.
And what sort of, what are the main threads that are coming out of your talks out of your interviews with them? What do you feel they see happening, or what is the experience that they have had in terms of being able to cope?
Well, the first main thread is that this sucks. So yeah, we all know this.
Oh, really?
horrible experience. But one of the things that they have discovered is getting back to their roots, if you will, on what's most important right now. So being able to pull that back in, regardless of their industry, like we know, here's the restrictions, but what's important and how can we still function on what's important right now within the restrictions? And that became the focal point conversation of how do I shift and how do I make the next best decision to get us to the next day, like in the next week and the next month, because people aren't thinking, I work in strategy. I'm a strategist. I am a business coach that guides people into making that plan for the future. And so when we talk about these things, everybody's kind of had to just narrow it down to the next day, the next week, the next 30 days. And because we don't know, we don't get a heads up very well. We don't know when the next restriction is going to hit. We don't know. And so how do you plan for the future when you don't know when you're going to get knocked down? And so we've learned to have those conversations with each other. And they've also learned, this has also been a common thread, we need to learn what we didn't know before. Like we have to learn new things because everybody's just been we're doing it because it's working. It's like, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And then everything broke at the same time.
Yeah.
You don't know how to fix this. And so it was that, of course we feel horrible. Let's get back to our roots. What do we need to learn next has been the common things within all of these conversations.
Yeah. Interesting. So my podcast, which I explained earlier, is about sort of how businesses are coming through this.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm finding as common threads is people saying to me, we had not been prepared. I think this is the same point that you've just made, actually. We were not prepared for every eventuality. We were running our businesses. We weren't prepared for, the biblical axe to fall.
Right.
And,
all at the same time.
No. And so, risk management is something that people are talking about now.
Yes.
You have to look at your business and say, what if this was to happen? What are the strategies that we have in place for them? So I think it's going to make, as the years go by, I think those of us who've been through this will be saying to themselves that every year they have to think about, the worst possible scenarios and how they would cope. I mean, I think that's going to be a major change, really, I do, in the way people run their businesses from now on. But what let me see what else. Making sure you're cash rich all the time.
Yes.
Not making sort of unwise investments. Because if the worst happens, then you're really caught with your tail between your legs, or with your pants down, as we say in this country.
Yes, we say that too.
You say that too.
And
slightly different nuance.
And you would be surprised how many small businesses don't use a budget. And so that's been one of the first things, like you mentioned, being cash rich, and like create the budget so you will know
where you are.
So it's a very good point.
Yeah. So, and let me see what else. I'm just looking at my little list here. Oh, yes. Another thing that really came out of this was the need to sort of jack up or bump up your communication strategies, so that you not only did you have really great communications with your clients, but also that you had really great communications in-house with your team, that you kept on top of things, you kept them informed. And I think that's something that's come out of this whole process, is not only the need, but also how to do it. So, for example, like having an internal podcast for your workforce, whereby every week you addressed certain things, you issued it on a podcast, and maybe you got some of your team to talk to each other, interview each other for the podcast. So all sorts of interesting ways of using a podcast came out of that, but also simply improving your communication strategies so that you kept people informed about what was going on. That was something that came out of it. And mental health. Now that is another issue. Is that something that you have been talking about?
Yes. We finally have come to, in our country, we're very big on the hustle. If you want to make it, you're going to work hard and you're going to hustle from dawn till dawn again. Like, you can sleep when you're dead. I mean, that's the general consensus about, like, when you're the entrepreneur, well, you're going to hustle all the time. Well, this year you better learn to not hustle. Like, you need to step back a second. Your brain cannot process everything that's going on that is being thrown at you. Even if you were, because I don't watch the news every day. I get the headline.
Really?
Oh, I don't, because it stresses me out. It actually makes me mad. So I don't like to be mad every day. I limit my input because I know it's toxic up here.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm
and
aware.
That's your strategy.
It is my strategy. I'm very well aware of what's happening, but I don't live in it. I'm just aware of it. And so I've got other things to concentrate on, but I've practiced that before this all happened. Those who don't know how to do that have been inundated with, we've had, again, riots and protests and, the social culture upheaval here, in addition to a global pandemic, and in addition to normal stress, in addition to nobody's got any money, people are losing jobs. Like, it's just so much. And you come to realize it is a thing. It is real that your brain cannot handle anymore. You've got to stop for a moment and take care of yourself so that you can decompress all of that and find a centering point to come back at it. And business owners are terrible about it because we tend to not take breaks anyway. And now we've got all of this on additional stuff. And even I've had to go, the phone has got to get turned off for a full 24 hours. Just turn it off. Don't need to know, and be done. So yes, mental health has become a big conversation. Before Thanksgiving hit, we started at the 1st of November, really diving deep into, we can't handle this stuff anymore. We just can't handle it.
Yeah. And I'm finding that companies are really addressing it, that the people I'm speaking to, they're really thinking about their workforce, about the stress that's been sort of the additional stress that's on them. Because I mean, when you've got parents who are trying to hold down a job and homeschool their children, and I mean, that is the most incredible stress that I could ever think of, because my husband and I, it turned out we've got 2 boys, and one of our boys has got dyslexia. And well, now he's a young adult, so it's not a problem anymore, or at least he's found ways to work around it.
But if he was younger, and at home with you,
and at home, and we didn't really, to be honest, and it's it doesn't reflect well on us, but we didn't pick it up in the early days, and we used to get quite angry with him for apparently, this is awful, but for apparently being lazy and not trying to address, not trying to learn to read properly. We couldn't understand why he wasn't learning to read, and eventually, when he was about 9, we realized what the problem was. And so then, we could cope with it and deal with the problem. But if we had that on top of trying to run a business, I think we might all have gone round the bend. I mean, it just, it would have been a lot to put up with, wouldn't it? It really would have been a lot. And so my heart goes out to all these people who have had to manage. And, I can see that why companies have started to focus on the need to address mental health issues and to make it easier for their staff. I mean, that makes total sense, doesn't it? If you don't do it, then your staff is going to have time off to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's been an adjustment. I know, most of our larger companies, even the small firms, the professional industry, they're like, go work at home. We'll take care of the technology. we'll get you what you need to work virtually. And we may have one or two of you in here at a time, but everybody go home. This transition from working in an office with structured hours to bringing it now in your house 24/7. That has also been an adjustment for a lot of my friends who have those jobs. And in the beginning, I was like, welcome to my world. It's hard to separate because it doesn't leave. It doesn't leave. It's always here. And so then how do you turn it off? And there has to be some tactical ways to do, like shut lights down, shut the computer off, walk out the door and close the door. Like that room is done. But when you got kids running in and out and everything is now blended together and you don't know when one starts and when one stops. So structure has gone out the window this year. It's just really hard to.
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely. And thank goodness though, that the sort of major part or the worst part of the epidemic, in the sense that we all had to get used to it, took place in the summer or in the spring going into the summer, because it meant, I mean, for me anyway, we had a fabulous spring here and a fabulous early summer. And it was so sort of healing for me just to go outside. We're lucky enough to have a garden, and just to sit outside and soak up the sun and just allow this chaos around us just to kind of, melt away. And all right, now it's winter and we don't have that anymore, but at least we know what we're facing. We know a whole load more. We've got our heads around it. We've got a vaccine, in the pipeline. So it's not so bad. But had the pandemic struck at this time last year, I think it would have been a lot tougher, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're still adjusting. We're still adjusting. That's why all the Christmas decorations went up like in October instead of they were like, I need Christmas now.
We went very belatedly last weekend to buy a Christmas tree, only to find that most of them had been bought already. So it's obviously
the same experience there. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So we came home with this really like sort of bent, twisted, runt of a Christmas tree.
We call those the Charlie Brown trees. Like the poor little thing. Yeah, same experience. My mom lives in Tennessee, so a state south of us, and she has a job based here in Louisville. So she comes up to my apartment once a week, and I was like, I will actually decorate for her. And so same experience. I was like, I'm just looking for these little bows, and there was nothing. I'm like, well, I'm late to this game. Got it. But at least I've done it. I have finally done it. But I'm one of those, I'm like, it's got to get closer to Christmas to feel like Christmas for me. But yeah, everybody, we just, as a whole, need something to make us feel joyous and happy again, regardless of adversity. And, the Christmas spirit, if you will, is one of those things that when you see twinkling lights and the jingle bell music, it just kind of all starts to bubble up. And I love it for everybody who gets into that.
Yeah. Well, I think speaking for myself, the Christmas sort of jollities are not going to happen really until next week, because I've just been too busy. So, I'm sure you too. So it's all a bit delayed. But the one other thing actually that I wanted to talk to you about that has been interesting over here has been the impact on the environment, really, of working from home. And also the fact that so many companies are now talking about making this a permanent arrangement. Mm-hmm. Now, is that happening with you too?
So a friend of mine works at Chevron, so the gas company, Chevron. He does a lot of their numbers things. I don't know exactly what his job is, but they had moved him home along with pretty much everybody in the building. And they notified him, I guess about a month ago, that they were going to just make it more of a permanent style to where you could be working from home. So they've started to, reduce those expenses, the overhead of the building itself. They've not gotten to that step yet, but that's what they're planning to do. But it's also interesting that around here we have more office buildings being built, when yet the conversation is work from home. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. I don't know if they're building it for a capacity 3 years from now, or I have no idea what's going to happen with that. I just noticed that they're still popping up in my area. I'm like, great for the construction industry, but are they going to sell those spots? I'm not sure. Yeah. But yeah, there is a lot of conversation about that.
Yeah. I don't know if you have this problem in the States, and I'm pretty sure you don't, but we have a problem with housing. We don't really have enough houses, especially for people starting at the bottom of the ladder. And but on the other hand, our high streets, our retail areas, because we don't have retail centres in the same way that you do, although we do have them. But I mean, our high streets, our main streets in the centre of our towns are really sort of like the main place where people would go shopping. And these are now really suffering. Lots of shops have gone to the wall over the whole pandemic period, and were anyway going to go to the wall probably, but the pandemic hastened that. And now we are talking really seriously about flipping usage so that we will return some of these spaces, these retail spaces, to for housing needs, which will be really interesting to see how that works. And it makes you wonder if maybe some of these, well, you know, some of these blocks that are dedicated for businesses will end up being changed and renovated in order to accommodate people's homes. I don't know, but I guess this is all part of the knock-on effect of the pandemic hastening changes in our world.
Yeah. We actually, in a housing situation in our area here, so we have Louisville is right on the Ohio River to Indiana. And so we are in this special little section called Kentucky-ana. So on both sides of this river, there has been this resurgence of Main Street. So High Street, Main Street USA has started to revitalize our downtowns. And that includes Louisville downtown and New Albany downtown. And so because of the resurgence of independent shops, independent restaurants, things like that, the housing has also been keeping up. So apartment complexes, or what they would do, some I know here in Louisville and in New Albany as well, the retail is on the first floor. They've built up the housing on top of that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they've incorporated all of it into one space, if you will. So that, so they've been doing that. That's been happening over the past 10 years or so. So we're a little ahead on that. We might be a little behind on tech, but we're a little ahead on that.
It sounds to me like you've got your act much better together than we have. I mean, it really is a major political sort of football or hotcake or problem over here, is that young people particularly, there's not enough housing stock, and there aren't enough starter homes, and they're far too expensive. Whatever property is available, it's just out of reach.
Yes, that is definitely a common theme. I mean, I know what I pay for my apartment, and I know what newer apartments are being charged, and I'm like, we'll just stay right here. This is expensive enough. We'll just stay. Now, one of the things that we had talked about in our previous conversation, I feel like is a good segue here, because we may have housing kind of under control, but we don't have the unemployment under control. So our unemployment rate, as we talked in our previous try, ours is higher than yours. That's for sure.
just before I came on air today, I kind of scrabbled around to find my notes from our last chat, and very, very deeply, inefficiently, I have lost all those figures that I so carefully put together. And then that made me sound so well informed in our first recording.
Because you were.
I was, but oh dear, chaos reigns.
Well, I mean,
in my
but
household, clearly.
just to give our listeners an example, as a percentage, we were a couple of percents higher in unemployment. So that put us at a lot. We have a lot of more unemployment happening over here. And then we also talked about probably is because we love to party. So a huge industry for us is going to be hospitality, and under hospitality falls concerts, sporting events, restaurants, hotels, tourism. All of this stuff got massively hit, and it displaced a lot of workers that are still trying to, because they have to learn new things to do new things. And there's honestly only so many delivery jobs. So you can't switch from a horizontal move very quickly right now. So you have to learn new things to get into a new position. And we even talked about Disney World. So the Disney company themselves, they've lost billions of dollars, $2.8 billion. Yeah, that was their September. I was like, oh, Lord, mercy. That had to hurt to see that number. But it also makes sense why they could not continue to furlough, to keep employees on enough to keep it going. So there are thousands of cast members out there who have just got to find something else to do until Disney regroups to be able to bring those back. So even, we think they're Disney, they can pay for everything. Well, not if you aren't able to go play and pay, right? So that this whole cycle of things is just really hard to navigate how to make it work. And people are getting either inventive and innovative, or they've kind of given up. They just need a break. So there's not been a lot of in between.
It's interesting, you use the word furlough here, because it's been like a buzzword, this word furlough, in the United Kingdom, but only since the pandemic began, because the government has brought in what they call a furlough scheme, which, and they use the word furlough to mean that people are laid off work, but paid by the government. It's a job retention scheme, really. They're paid a wage that's up to almost what they're used to earning, and with the intention that they can then go back and take back those same jobs once restrictions have eased. So we have been using the word furlough in a sense to mean you're receiving money, but you're not able to work doing that job, but you will be able to go back to it in due course. Whereas I think in the States, the word furlough actually means losing your job. Is that right?
In this sense, no. It would be like a paid layoff.
Okay.
Would also be a furlough. When we lose our job, we just called it, you're fired.
Okay. Oh, okay.
We have to let you go. We can no longer, sustain whatever nice words you want to use, but basically it's the pink slip. But what we're also finding is, like, the assistance that we had in the beginning, our government was pretty quick, surprisingly quick, to have that discussion on how do we financially help the business community sustain employment. And so there were a lot of different opportunities. We call it, as a business sense, we have grants. So that would be money that we can apply for. If we are approved for a grant, we don't have to pay a grant back, versus having a payroll protection plan. Yes, PPP, payroll protection plan, was we're going to loan you X amount of dollars per employee for X amount of time, but you as a business will have to pay that back. And even though, so a lot of it kept enough people for definitely a handful of months, minus the industries that got shut down. The rest of them were able to say, okay, we can kind of weather the shutdown until the restrictions start to lift. So hair salons, for example, I have a client that is a hair salon and a boutique. So they were shut down for 2 solid months. They were not allowed to do business. So they applied for the loan. They got a small grant, and then the loan kept their stylists employed so that they could come back.
Okay.
Right. So as from the employee perspective, that would be considered a furlough, but the business owner perspective, it's a loan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
But so that has to be paid back by the business. So that's quite tough on the business then, isn't it? If they haven't got any revenue coming in. Yeah. So we have had, I'm just quickly adjusting my position here. It's a very uncomfortable chair. So yeah, we have a series of government schemes, such as, for example, the bounce back loan scheme to help companies recover. It sounds like you too have, in the States, you've got various facilities in place to help people. But one of the problems that we've got here is for limited companies, directors who really don't, who kind of fall between two stools, who don't really get to benefit from the loan schemes because it would put them into debt, or some of the schemes that they are eligible for would put them into debt, and they can't afford that. And they can't furlough themselves because if you're furloughed, you're not allowed to work. But if it's your company, you would have to keep working on it. Exactly. So they can't. So they literally fall between two stools, and they've been really, as they have been hard done by, and they are suffering. And it's a pity, because if we lose a whole load of our small businesses because of all this, who is there to help us rebuild our economy at the end of the day? And small businesses play a really major factor in all that. We could lose up to 75 million jobs. Maybe that's slightly sort of over exaggeration, but we could lose many millions of jobs if the small companies go to the wall because their directors just couldn't keep going. So that's a distinct problem that we do face in the United Kingdom. But I guess time will tell how we all manage to come back, and I'm sure we will, because both of our countries have got people full of vim and vigor and business nous and
creativity
ambition
and
creativity,
amazing ideas, and yes,
and I'm sure I am sort of intrinsically optimistic about how it's going to work out. It's just I think there's a bit of a rocky road ahead before we emerge from all this. And my goodness, I hope this pandemic is the only one of our generation, because I'm not sure we could survive another one.
I need a nap before then. That's all I just need a little sleep.
Yeah. We're talking of little sleeps. It's not that late here, but it is beginning to get dark. And because it's just the start of your day, isn't it, really? What time is it with you now?
For me, it is right at 11 a.m.
Oh, right. We've been at this for an hour. Okay, so it's 4 o'clock here and it's getting dark. It's horrible.
Oh, yeah. But after Christmas, it starts to lighten up again, because, again, Derby's on its way. Derby means spring has sprung and days are longer, and all good things happen.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, excellent. Well, I think as long as we can laugh and smile, we're going to get through this. And as I keep saying to my children, because my parents lived through the Second World War, and I keep saying to my children, we're not being bombed. Our food aid convoys aren't being torpedoed.
Right.
And we've got enough to eat. We're going to be all right. But it has been a tough time.
Well, and even the brightest diamond has to get polished through adversity, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting there.
Well, I don't know how bright a diamond I am. I think I'm pretty tarnished, really. But it's been really lovely talking to you, and
Same.
I hope we can do this again to see how Kentucky and Louisville are doing, and how compared to how Cheltenham is doing. You know, in a few months' time, it would be lovely to come back together again.
Absolutely, we should totally do a Derby Week episode.
A Cheltenham Girl Cup week. Brilliant. Okay.
Well, fantastic. Serena, I very much appreciate your time today. It's been brilliant. I love it.
Me too. Me too. It's been fantastic. Exchanging experiences and finding out what's going on in your country. Well, look, happy Christmas and a happy New Year, and may it be a prosperous one for you.
Joyous and peaceful as well to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
So I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as we enjoyed having that conversation. I encourage you to keep up with us on Small Business Small Talk. Go like, subscribe, share with your friends, come back and watch as many times as you want, or listen as many times as you want. Comment, tell us what you like and what really sparked you for this episode or even previous episodes. So engage with us so we know what you like and what's been helping you. If you have a struggle or if you have a topic that you're interested in, I'm more than happy to have that interview on podcast for Small Business Small Talk. With that, I definitely thank you for your time and the energy that you've brought back to this podcast. For me personally, it has been a wonderful adventure this year to get this launched in a new direction, and you guys have responded very well. I appreciate that. We're on a roll, and 2021 is right around the corner. And with that, I say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.